Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create a almost good quality play blast with shadows and everything from Maya. So let's start. So as you can see here, I have two viewports, one showing my render camera, and this is going to be the view that I'm going to export with play blast, and I have some animation happening here. The ball kind of enters the scene, jumps up and down, and then hits the ball, a little bit of zoom back. Okay, so let's start and see what do we need for get a almost good quality play blast video out of this scene. Okay, so I have my notes here. I'm just gonna go over them. So the first thing would be, it would be nice if we get some shadows in the scene. First thing that grabs your attention is that this ball doesn't have any shadows, and it would be nice if you could see some shadows in the scene. So to do that, we need to make sure that for the viewport that we're going to render, we have some settings already checked on. So the first thing would be, if you look up here in the render camera viewport, you need to first check on the shadows, right? So you're going to check this on. Although you do that, you're not going to see any shadows in the scene because this is the default lighting that you see with this viewport. In order to see the shadows, we need to create some actual lights. And I'm going to just delete these two lights that I already have in the scene because those were my test lights. Okay, so this is the default light setting that Maya shows you. To see the actual light, we need to check on the light here. Do you see that? Use all lights. So I'm going to do that. And you see that the scene turns into black because it doesn't have any light in the scene, right? So let's just create some lights. I'm going to go to my rendering tab here, and I'm going to start with directional light. So with the directional light, what it does is that, and you can see it here. If I hit W, I can just move it up. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter where you put the directional light in the scene because it just shows a direction for a light as if it's something far away, like a sun or something. So it doesn't matter where you put it in the scene, but the direction of it is important. So if you rotate it like this, it's going to cast a shadow like that. If you have it rotated like this, then the shadow is going to fall right underneath the ball, for example, right? So although we have that, we still don't see any lights because, as I said, this light, it doesn't matter where you put it in the scene. It's going to be like, way over, like it's going to see everything in the scene. And because we have this doom kind of a sphere, all over the scene that we have, the light cannot get in. So in order to see the light, I'm just going to hide this geometry so you can actually see that the light is working. And if I grab this light, rotate it, you can see that, we see a shadow. The shadow, it doesn't show a good quality. We're going to work on that. But we know that the light is working, but we just need to specify that we don't want this geometry to cast a shadow. So let's just go ahead and do that. So go to sky. I'm just gonna make it visible again. But then I'm gonna go to the attribute editor, to the attributes of this geometry. And in the render stats, I'm gonna check off cast shadow and receive shadow. So as soon as I do that, it becomes almost invisible for the light. So light kind of sees through it because it doesn't cast any shadow. So it doesn't make our scene to look dark, right? So that's the first thing. And we can see the shadow now, right? So while we're at the sky geometry, we need to do some other adjustments as well. So you can see that we have the directional light, and it kind of puts a shadow, over here in the sky. What we want for the sky is to be bright all over the place, no matter whatever light that we're using. So in order to do that, we need to go to the material that we assigned to the sky doom or this sphere that you use kind of as a sky dome. It is not a sky dome, but we're using that to apply our sky image, right? So you need to come here and change the Lambert to surface shader. So surface shader, it doesn't show any shadows, anything. It just, you know, sees, it's gonna just show whatever texture that you put it with the no reflection, no like, you know, kind of concentration of light, anything like that. So, but it doesn't have like a color channel. It has an out color. We're not gonna care about that. We're gonna do the same thing to assign an image to it. So you just need to click on this icon next to out color and then go to file, assign your file to it. My sky is not high quality, but okay, and now you can see that it is bright all over the place. It doesn't show like any shadows, and that's exactly what we want. So let's see. Let me take a look at my notes here. Image to the out color. Yeah, I think we're done with the sky. So let's focus on the light that we created here. So you can see that I'm just going to jump into this view. So you can see that it shows these shadows, but it is not a beautiful shadow. So let's just go and fix that. So if you select the light and then go to the attribute editor, and attribute editor is this icon. If you don't see your attribute editor, just click on this icon. It's going to pop up. So you can see that in the shadow section, it might look like something like this as you go to the attribute for this shadow. It looks like something like this. Then you open this shadows section, and you can see by default it uses ray trace shadows. You need to switch that to use depth map shadows, and then it doesn't show anything. To get the shadows, we need to crank up the resolution to whatever number it allows us to do, which in this case is 8192, right? And then the filter size, we need to crank it up also to 5. And then we get almost a decent shadow. One other thing about the depth map shadow is that it kind of depends to the size of your scene. So if we make this scene a little bit smaller, like this object that I have as the ground, if I make it smaller, you can see that it kind of enhances the quality of the shadow just a tiny bit, right? Oh, I didn't mean to change the camera. Hopefully I had this icon turned off so it didn't key that. So I'm just going to lock the camera so it doesn't happen again. But you can see that the quality of the shadow is enhanced. So keep that in mind. And if your sky dome is too big, or if your background is just going beyond you know, what you need, just make it smaller, and then you're gonna get a better quality shadow. Okay. So that's that about the shadow. Let's see, what else do we have? So here you have this option for screen space ambient occlusion. So when you check that on, you see that some, let me just make this background to be referenced so I don't click on it. Okay, so you can see as I check this on and off, this shadow appears and disappears, right? So ambient occlusion is it's basically, it's going to put a shadow where there are like creases. When two objects are getting so close, it's just going to create a shadow. Depending on the scene and the direction of your light, you might want to have it checked on or check, not this one, this is the actual shadow. So this is the screen space ambient occlusion. You might want to have it checked on or checked off. So it's your decision. In this case, because you know, my directional light, it's kind of, it's not blending into my directional light, so I'm going to check it off, but it's up to you and the, you know, direction of light that you're using. Okay, so we added the light, we changed the resolution for the shadow here, and we changed the filter size. Let's see, what else do we need to change here? Before we get to the render setting and everything, let's do some more adjustments to this light, and also add some more light to the scene so we don't see this really dark shadows. So first thing would be for the shadow color of here, it's always good not to use pitch black like this. For example, if this shadow falls on my ground, which is kind of like greenish, I would be like maybe this, if I turn it to green like that, this is going to be too green for my shadow. But if I push it to the gray side of things, then this would be more like it, something like that. So it is not all the way black. I can probably even go more to the gray side of things. Or maybe blue, because the sky is blue and it might cast some shadow, some light in the shadow that I see, something like that. I think that works for my background, but if your background is colorful and you think that if you change it to some color it's not going to mix well with the other colors that you have in the background, you can just set it to be like kind of gray. But my suggestion is that don't use this black. This is like too much. You can use kind of a gray with a little bit of color in that, depending on your backgrounds. Okay, so we changed that. And let's just create some other lights. I'm going to duplicate this light, Control D, right? So I get another light, which is going to be, because it's at the same direction of this light, I'm getting a more intense version of the light. So what I want to do is that first I want to just, I'm just moving it up because I want to be able to see that. And I'm going to change the direction of that, maybe to go from this direction, as if it's coming from the ground. You can think of it as like a light that is bouncing off the ground. You can think of it like that. But it is too intense, and it also casts some shadow. So for this light, which is going to be the ambient or reflected light that is supposed to come from the ground, and you can tell by the direction of it because it's in this direction, right? I'm going to choose the light to not emit a specular. So it means that we're going to lose this, and this is exactly what we want. We don't want the shape of the light source or whatever thing that is on any object. We just want to use it as a reflected light. So I'm just going to check that off first. Then I'm going to change the intensity so it is not as intense as the light that we're using to create the shadows. Then I'm going to change the color to, again, something close to maybe this green, a little bit brighter maybe, something like that, and then done. Let's see. And okay, let's see if I get rid of this light. What do we get with only that light? Okay, now it's applying to the scene. Okay, and I can see only the effect of this light because I hide the other light. So something like this will do. I think that works. Let's see. Something like that, and then like this. And again, I think this floor is also blocking the light in this direction. So in this case, I need to make sure that this object is not also casting any shadow. So I need to select the floor, ground, whatever thing that you have, and then make sure that it doesn't cast shadow. And you see, as I do that, you get to see the light, right? Because don't let the location of these lights fool you. They're only showing the direction of light. It doesn't mean that the light source is here. Light source is actually far from the scene, but it has this direction to it. So I'm just going to check off the cast shadow and receive shadow. Maybe I wanted to receive shadow. Okay, so let's just check this backlight on. Yeah, that works now. Okay, that's way better. Now we can actually see that. This is good. Again, I'm going to hide this to see what this light does to my scene. Rotate it like that. what am I changing here? Here, that's what I want. So 1 is just too much. I'm just gonna put it down to 170 maybe. And then I'm gonna change this to darker. Put this dark. This is better. Okay. And we don't need to change the color for that because this light doesn't cast shadow, and I make sure that I check this off so it doesn't, this light, the feeling light, the fill light actually, they're not supposed to cast shadow. So this light that is supposed to come from the ground, the bouncing, the bounced rays from the ground, this is not supposed to cast any shadow, so make sure that you check off both of these options so it's not active. No shadows for that light, okay? And then I can probably duplicate that and add another one for the sky, something like that. Again, I don't want it to cast shadow. I already set those settings, so I don't need to check that. I know that I checked them off before the application, but I want to change the color to something more blue, something like that. And then done. Let's check back all the lights in. And this light, for the main light, I want it to be more yellow, something like that. And you can see that the light kind of changes the color of your materials, right? So if you don't want that, you can just not add color to these lights, or be really subtle about it. Okay. So let's say that's what we want, and make sure to save your scenes as always. Okay, so let's see, what do we have to check here? Main light. Okay, so now we need to go and make sure that everything is ready for the play blast. First thing would be to, put all the backgrounds in a display layer and set it to be on reference, so you can actually not have something selected in the scene. If you have something selected in the scene like that, then it's not good. It's going to show up in your play blast, okay? So make sure you don't have that, so you can actually click somewhere in the scene and it doesn't select anything, right? The next thing would be, we don't want to see these extra stuff in our play blast, right? So one way you can get rid of all those like curves, these lines, whatever that you see in the scene, is that if you go to show and then say show nothing, none, right? And then go back and be like, only show me the polygons. Then you only see the polygons, and that's what you need to have for rendering your, get renders from your play blast, right? Because it just, captures everything in the scene. Okay, so before we go to play blast, we need to double check our render settings. So I'm just going to go to my render settings, make sure that it is set to HD 1080, which is 1920 by 1080, resolution 72, and render cam. I don't think it's important because play blast, it's gonna play blast your active view, I think. So I'm gonna make sure this is correct. Close that, and then we're going to go to Windows and then Play Blast Options. So here you want to make sure that you have the range that you want to do the Play Blast in your time slider, right? As you can see here, I have set this time slider to render from frame 1 to, not render, but actually go from frame 1 to 193. That's the whole timeline that I get here, right? So we need to adjust that, and then in the time range you would want to say that it needs to create the play blast from the time slider, right? Then you're going to check off the view ornaments, which in this case would be like render camera. If you have any heads-up displays on, in this case, you want to check this off so it doesn't get into your play blast. And then the other thing would be, so here we used to create the play blast with AVI, which is really big and it's really low quality and it doesn't play well on every machine. So you can just select that and then choose QuickTime format, which might not be available on your machine. If it is not, if you click here and you don't see this Qt, I'm including the link here that it shows you how you can install QuickTime in Player, the kind of the basic setting. What was it called? QuickTime Essential. Okay, so it shows you how to do it step by step. So if you follow it step by step, it should do that. Hopefully that's not the case in the animation lab, but if you wanted to create a Play Blast on your home machine and it is not a Mac machine, it's a Windows machine, you wanna and you don't have QuickTime Essential, you want to do this and do exactly as it says, so that you have access to the format of Qt here, okay? And when you did that, you need to probably either close and reopen the Play Blast window or close and reopen Maya. The other thing that I noticed here is that I was having problem to get this Qt format, QuickTime format on my machine for the longest time, and then I realized that totally by accident, some of my students, he was mentioning that if you have two versions of Maya on your computer, sometimes it does weird things. And I was like, yeah, let's just give it a try. And I uninstalled the 2017 that I had on this machine, and then this started working, which is absolutely weird. But thank you, Dave, for just giving me this hint. And if you have two versions of Maya on your machine and you tried installing that, restarted Maya, and still you didn't see the QuickTime export, it's probably because you have two versions of Maya on your machine, which is really not so good, not so great. Okay. So from here, you're going to select Qt for QuickTime, and then for encoding, you would want to choose H.264. Okay, if you're working on a Mac machine, you can just export as .mov. Okay, and I think that's the default for that. The quality, I think by default it's at 70 something, so make sure you have it at 100. And for the display size, make sure that by default it wants to grab it from the window, but make sure you change it to render setting so it actually does the 1920 by 1080. Size, again, I think it's like at 0.5 or something, crank it up to 1. Movie file, so you want to create, define a path for that. So you need to just select the folder that you want to have this Play Blast, and then here's the tricky part: if you don't give it a name, it's not gonna save anything, right? It's just gonna keep trying to open things. So here you need to give it a name. So in this case, I'm just gonna call this Play Blast 1, right? Save. And if you want the file to be kind of each time that you do the Play Blast, it's going to replace that if you have this option turned on, right? But it's going to ask you that it's replacing that file. So here, if you want to change, you want to have multiple versions of your Play Blast, all you need to do is that come here and just change the number at the end, right? To get new saves. The other thing before we do the Play Blast is that you need to come here and check off the resolution gate, so because it's going to show up in your Play Blast, and make sure that this window is active. And I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't miss anything here. I mentioned all the stuff that I was supposed to mention. So you just hit apply. It's going to do that. And notice that we don't see any shadows for the ball here because it's actually in the shadow of the wall. So nothing is wrong with not seeing the shadow in this case. You can add another light that, kind of you can turn it on and off only for this scene and you have some cast shadow. Or actually here you might want to turn on the ambient occlusion for that, and something appears here which is better than nothing. Or you can actually add some light, and you can add keyframes for visibility, so it becomes visible and invisible for the frames that you need that, so it doesn't affect the whole scene. And yeah, that's it. This is the Play Blast, and then you're gonna just submit that for the final movie. Yeah, that's it.